I'm Vicky. I still remember that fateful day at my grandmother's memorial service in February 2026. There were about 60 people in the room, all gathered to pay their respects to my beloved grandma. My father, Mr. Thompson, stood at the front, introducing his children to the mourners. "This is our son, Leo, and our daughter, Lily," he said, his voice steady. Then, he turned his cold gaze towards me, standing alone at the back. With a sneer, he declared, "And that one over there, she's not really our daughter. We've just been letting her stay with us." I felt a lump form in my throat. I was his daughter, the middle child, born in 1994. But in that moment, it was as if I didn't exist. The woman standing next to him, a lady in her 50s with a gray blazer and a leather briefcase, slowly turned towards my father. Her expression changed, and she fixed him with a steady look. Placing her hand on her briefcase, she said calmly and clearly, "Actually, Mr. Thompson, I'm here because of her." In that instant, the web of lies my parents had woven over the past 4 years started to unravel. But to understand how I ended up in that position, standing at the back of my grandmother's memorial, being ignored by my own father, you need to know how it all began. My family was part of a well-to-do community in a small town. My father, Mr. Thompson, was a proud and controlling man. He always wanted things to go his way and didn't take kindly to anyone challenging his authority. My mother, Mrs. Thompson, was more submissive, always going along with my father's decisions, even when they were wrong. I had noticed some strange behavior from my parents long before the memorial. Around Thanksgiving 2022, my father's colleague asked about the family. My father introduced Leo and Lily, then gestured vaguely in my direction and said, "And she's just staying with us for now." It was as if I was a temporary guest, not a part of the family. When Christmas 2022 rolled around, I received a text from my mother. "Keeping it small this year. Just immediate family," it read. I stared at the message for what felt like an eternity. I was immediate family. I was their daughter. I called my mother, and she answered on the 5th ring. "We think it's best if you sit this one out, Vicky, given everything that's happened," she said. When I asked what had happened, she simply replied, "You know what you did," and hung up. I spent Christmas alone in my apartment, 90 minutes away from the house where I grew up. Later, I saw the photos on social media. There were 25 people at the gathering, with stockings on the mantel for everyone except me. I started to document these incidents, not really knowing why at first. By early 2023, a pattern emerged. I was excluded from 6 family events, introduced as a temporary guest 4 times, left off the family group chat, and removed from my parents' social media family photos. Old photos where I was tagged were suddenly untagged, cropped, or deleted. I was also not invited to Lily's engagement party. But the real turning point came at Aunt Helen's 60th birthday party in March 2023. I had received an invitation with my name on it. When I walked into the private room at the restaurant, my mother pulled me aside. "What are you doing here?" she hissed. I told her I was invited, but she replied, "You weren't supposed to actually come. Aunt Helen doesn't understand the situation. You need to leave." When I asked what situation, she looked at me as if I was being difficult, as if there was some family meeting I'd missed where they'd decided I was no longer welcome. "The situation with your behavior, with the accusations you've been making about your father," she said. That's when I realized it wasn't random, it was a coordinated retaliation. It all started in September 2021. I was 26 at the time, about to turn 27. I hadn't seen my grandmother in 3 months. Every time I called to visit, my parents said she was resting, not feeling well, and that I shouldn't overwhelm her. I was busy with work and life, so I didn't push it. But one Saturday after Labor Day, I had some free time. I decided to surprise her. I drove 90 minutes from my apartment to my grandmother's house. When I arrived, the lawn needed mowing, and there were 3 days' worth of newspapers on the porch. The porch light was on in the middle of the day, which was very unlike my grandmother, who grew up during a time when wasting electricity was considered a sin. I knocked on the door, but there was no answer. I tried the doorknob, and it was unlocked. I pushed the door open and called out, "Grandma, it's Vicky." From upstairs, I heard a crash. I ran up and found her in the bedroom, trying to pick up dropped pill bottles. She was thinner than I remembered, and she was wearing the same clothes she'd had on 3 months ago. When she saw me, relief flooded her face, followed by fear. "I thought you were Thompson," she said. The house was in a mess. Dishes were piled in the sink, laundry was everywhere, and mail was scattered across the kitchen table. There were unopened bills and final notices. I helped her sit down and checked the pill bottles. The prescriptions were 2 months overdue for refills. When I asked her when the last time someone came by to help, she said, "Thompson was here last week. He took the bank statements and said he's managing things so I don't have to worry." I felt sick to my stomach. I went downstairs and found a stack of bills. The electric company had sent a final notice, the water bill was 30 days overdue, the phone service had a suspension warning, and the cable was about to be disconnected. The total owed was $2,156. My grandmother had always paid her bills on time, so this was very unusual. I opened the desk drawer where she kept her bank statements, and it was completely empty. I called the bank, identified myself as her granddaughter, and asked about recent account activity. The representative hesitated and said they couldn't give specific details without power of attorney but confirmed that there had been regular withdrawals by her authorized representative. When I asked how much was in the account, there was another pause, and then they said $8,200. I hung up and went back to the closet, where I found old statements from before my father took over. In January 2018, the checking balance was $45,000. In 3.5 years, $37,000 had disappeared. I sat on the floor of my grandmother's closet, trying to catch my breath. My father had power of attorney, and he was supposed to be taking care of her, but instead, he was stealing from her. I also found fake invoices. There was a contractor estimate for an $8,500 roof repair dated 2019, but when I went outside to check the roof, the shingles were old but intact, and there was no sign of recent work. The invoice was clearly fabricated. When I came back inside, my grandmother was sitting at the kitchen table, waiting for me. "Vicky," she said quietly, "I think something's wrong, but every time I bring it up, they tell me I'm imagining things, that I'm getting confused." I took her hand and said, "You're not confused, Grandma. I'm going to help you, but I need you to trust me." She gripped my fingers tightly and whispered, "Don't tell Thompson I told you, please. He gets angry when I talk about the money." I drove home in silence. Over the next 2 weeks, I researched elder financial abuse, checked and rechecked the numbers, and convinced myself that what I'd discovered was real. Then, late one night in October 2021, I called the Adult Protective Services hotline. The intake worker asked me questions about my relationship to the victim, the nature of my concern, and the evidence I had. I provided everything: the unpaid bills, the missing medications, the $37,000 that had disappeared, and the fake invoices. When the worker asked if I'd confronted my father, I said no because I was afraid of what he might do. They gave me a case reference number and told me someone would follow up within 10 business days. As I hung up, my phone buzzed with a text from my mother. "Thompson said you visited Mom without telling us. That's not appropriate. We'll let you know when it's a good time to visit." I knew then that either my father had installed cameras or my grandmother had mentioned my visit, and he was watching. In January 2022, I got a call from an unfamiliar number. It was Ms. Carter, an Adult Protective Services investigator. She said she'd been assigned to my case and wanted to meet with me to discuss my report. We met at a coffee shop in a neutral location, away from my family. Ms. Carter was professional and direct. She asked me detailed questions about the timeline, the amounts, and my grandmother's mental state. She explained that my father having legal power of attorney complicated things, and we needed to prove he was acting against my grandmother's interests, not just poorly managing her money. Over the next 4 months, I became a secret witness. I visited my grandmother 6 times and recorded our conversations legally, since it was a one-party consent state. I documented the dates, the physical state of the house, the unpaid bills, the missing food in the fridge, and the medication refill delays. Ms. Carter conducted her own investigation, subpoenaed the bank records, interviewed my grandmother separately, requested medical records, and talked to the neighbors. In May 2022, Ms. Carter called to tell me they had enough evidence for a finding of financial exploitation. She was filing a recommendation with the court to revoke my father's power of attorney. She warned me that my family would know I'd reported them and asked if I was ready. I thought about my grandmother, alone and afraid in that house, and I said yes. She also asked me who I trusted to be my grandmother's new power of attorney if the court revoked my father's authority. I said it should be me. She paused and said my family wouldn't like that, but I told her I knew. She gave me some advice: document all communication, keep copies of everything, consider therapy for support, and prepare for family rejection. In June 2022, my father found out who had reported him. Everything changed. He called me one Tuesday evening. His voice was cold and full of controlled anger. "What the hell have you done?" he demanded. I tried to explain, but he wouldn't listen. He accused me of filing a false report with Adult Protective Services, of ruining the family. I told him I'd seen the bank statements and the money was gone, but he said I didn't understand finances and that my grandmother had given him permission. 2 minutes later, my mother called. She said my father was very upset and that what I was doing to the family was cruel. She suggested I see a therapist because I wasn't well. Over the next 2 months, my family started to build a narrative around me, trying to destroy my credibility before the court hearing. In August 2022, after the court hearing where APS presented their findings, I learned that my parents had told my grandmother's neighbors that I was going through a difficult time and might show up making strange claims. They were trying to isolate me and protect my father. In December 2022, I wasn't invited to the family Christmas gathering. The text from my mother said it was a small gathering for immediate family, but when I saw the photos later, there were 25 people there. There was no stocking for me on the mantle. In November 2022, Lily accidentally added me to the family WhatsApp thread. For 20 minutes, I saw all the messages about me. My mother said I wasn't well, Leo said I was just being dramatic for attention, and other family members suggested I needed medication. I screenshotted everything before Lily removed me from the thread. I sent the screenshots to Ms. Carter, and she said it was retaliation and that I should document everything. In January 2023, I tried to visit my childhood home. The key I had from years ago didn't work. The locks had been changed. When I knocked, my mother answered the door but didn't invite me in. She said they had the right to secure their home, and I was no longer their daughter because I'd decided to destroy the family. I stood on the porch where I'd played as a child, and I cried. Mrs. Jenkins, an elderly neighbor, watched from her window and looked away when I met her eyes. I got in my car and drove away. Leo texted me before I got home, saying my mother was crying and that I needed to stop tearing the family apart. In February 2023, the court officially revoked my father's power of attorney, and in March, it was transferred to me. Before the court finalized everything, my grandmother requested a meeting with her attorney, Mr. Parker. She asked me to drive her to his office in downtown. After the 90-minute meeting, she came out holding a sealed envelope. She gave it to me and said, "Don't open this until after I'm gone. Promise me." I promised. She said it was insurance. Ms. Carter called me a week later to tell me the court had finalized the power of attorney transfer. I now had the legal authority to make medical decisions, manage my grandmother's finances, and protect her. My first action was to pay all the overdue bills, which totaled $3,800. I restocked her medications, arranged for meal delivery, and set up home health aid visits. My second action was to change the bank accounts to require my Coke signature to prevent unauthorized withdrawals. My father found out about the changes via legal notice and left a voicemail accusing me of manipulating my grandmother and committing elder abuse. I played the voicemail for Ms. Carter, and she said it was evidence of harassment. From March 2023 to June 2024, I was able to visit my grandmother twice a week. I made sure her bills were paid, checked on her medications, talked to her doctors, and held her hand. But in June 2024, my parents found a new way to hurt me. My grandmother had a minor stroke and was in the hospital for 5 days. I stayed with her and made all the medical decisions as her healthcare proxy. My parents also showed up, but they maintained civility in front of the medical staff. After my grandmother was discharged, I arranged for increased home care. In July 2024, I received a letter from an attorney representing my parents. They were suing to overturn the power of attorney transfer, claiming I'd used undue influence on my grandmother during a period of diminished capacity. The lawsuit was frivolous, but it was a weapon to make my life difficult. In August 2024, my grandmother had another health crisis and was admitted to the hospital. When I arrived with my power of attorney documents, the nurse stopped me, saying the family had a restraining order against me. There was no such order, but my father had lied. By the time the hospital verified the truth, visiting hours were over. The next morning, my grandmother had already been discharged, and my father took her home. I called the house, and my mother answered, telling me not to call again. From September 2024 through January 2025, I tried everything to reach my grandmother. I made 12 phone calls, sent 8 emails, and mailed 3 handwritten letters, but all my attempts were unsuccessful. I also texted Leo and Lily for help, but they either didn't reply or said they couldn't get involved. In October 2025, I got a call from an unknown number. It was my grandmother whispering, "Vicky, is that you?" Before I could say much, the line went dead. When I called back, my father answered and told me to stop harassing them. That was the last time I heard her voice. In September 2025, my grandmother turned 81. I sent flowers and a card, but both were returned. I contacted Miss Carter, and she visited my grandmother. She reported that my grandmother was physically okay but was afraid to tell the truth about wanting to see me. By January 2026, my grandmother's health had declined rapidly, and she was admitted to a hospice. I found out from the hospital records, not from my family. When I tried to visit, I was put on the restricted visitor list. After some verification, I was told I could visit, but it was too late. My grandmother died on February 12, 2026. I got the call at 11:38 p.m. From a nurse who called off the record because she thought I should know. 2 days later, I received a text from Lily with just 5 words, "Memorial is Thursday at 2 o'clock. There were no condolences, just the logistics. On February 18, the obituary was published. My name wasn't mentioned. It was as if I'd never been a part of my grandmother's life. I screenshotted the obituary and sent it to Ms. Carter. She called within 5 minutes and said it was evidence of premeditation. She also asked if I was okay, but I just said yes. In the 2 weeks between my grandmother's death and the memorial service, Ms. Carter called me 3 times. The first time, she asked if I wanted her to bring the briefcase with all the evidence, including the APS report, the power of attorney transfer, the will, the video message my grandmother recorded, and the audio recordings. I hesitated, but she said it was better than being erased from the obituary. The second call was about the details of what would be in the briefcase. The APS investigation final report showed that my father had misappropriated $380,000 over 5 years through unauthorized withdrawals, false invoices, and unpaid bills. The court order transferred the power of attorney from my father to me. My grandmother's revised will from February 2023 left her entire estate, worth approximately $2.1 million, to me. The third call was 2 days before the memorial. Ms. Carter said when my father said I wasn't